Mist hung low over the grasslands, a thin silver veil that blurred the edges of the world. Luke Callahan moved through it with the deliberate pace of a man who had long since learned the value of conserving his strength. His boots pressed dark shapes into the dew, each step heavy from the tools strapped to his belt and the quiet weight he carried inside. 3 years had passed since the flood took his wife, but in his chest it still felt like yesterday, her hand slipping from his, the roar of water swallowing the rest. He kept his gaze down, watching the worn fence line that bordered the creek. A section had collapsed in last night's wind, the cedar posts leaning at a tired angle. He knelt to measure the damage, fingers tracing the grain of a splintered beam, when a sound reached him. Faint at first, almost like the groan of shifting branches. He straightened, turning toward the creek. The sound came again, sharper now. Not wood, not wind. It was a cry, high, ragged, urgent. Luke's pulse quickened. He left the fence, following the sound into the cottonwoods where the light broke in uneven patches. Twigs snapped underfoot. Somewhere ahead, the cry pitched higher, undercut by a low, rhythmic thumping. It wasn't a rhythm he recognized from the Mustangs he sometimes spotted on his rounds. This was heavier, measured, almost deliberate. He stepped into a clearing and froze. The sight punched the air from his lungs. In the center, a Mustang mare stood locked in a terrible dance with a predator Luke had only ever seen in photographs. The python was enormous, thick as his thigh, its body looped twice around the mare's belly. Its scales caught the weak morning light in dull, oil-dark patterns, muscles shifting beneath the surface with every constricting pulse. The mare's nostrils flared white, her eyes wild, her legs flailing in short, frantic kicks that found no escape. Her belly was swollen, heavy with a foal. Luke's first instinct was to step back. The second was to run. He knew the speed and power of a snake that size. One mistake, and he'd be on the ground with those coils around him instead. But the sight of her, the desperate strength in her trembling legs, the wheeze in her breath, rooted him where he stood. His gaze darted to the edge of the clearing. No herd. Mustangs weren't known for lingering when predators struck. They scattered. They survived. Yet this mare was alone, and every second her ribs compressed, her chance of living, of delivering that foal, slipped away. Luke's hand fell to the coiled rope at his hip. Against a creature like that, it felt laughable. Still, it was something. He shifted his weight forward, moving a step closer, then another. The python's head turned, tongue flickering in and out as it tasted the air between them. Luke kept his voice low, steady. Not words so much as sound, a tone meant to keep the mare from bolting into worse trouble. The mare jerked against the pressure, her hooves tearing clumps from the earth. The snake adjusted, muscles rippling in slow, terrible certainty. Luke saw the movement for what it was, a predator confident in the kill. He glanced again at the mare's eyes. They met his, wild but bright, as if somewhere beneath the panic there was a question. Will you act or will you turn away? A gust of wind rattled the branches overhead. Luke used it to mask another step closer, knees bent, shoulders low. The smell of damp earth and musk from the snake's scales thickened the air. His boots sank in the churned soil where the mare had fought. The python lifted its head slightly, perhaps weighing a new threat. Luke's fingers tightened on the rope. Every instinct screamed at him to keep distance, but there was no time to weigh outcomes. If he left for help, she would be gone. If he stayed without trying, he might watch her die in front of him. He eased the rope into his right hand, feeling its familiar weight. 1 coil. 2. His thumb pressed a frayed edge where years of use had worn it smooth. Then the ground shifted under his boots, not from his own movement, but from something deeper. A tremor, soft at first, then stronger. Luke froze, head snapping toward the tree line. Through the mist, the faint drumming of hooves rose, distant but coming fast, the rhythm tightening like a heartbeat in his ears. The python's head twitched toward the sound. The mare's ears pricked, her body going still in a way that was not surrender but anticipation. Luke felt the moment stretch, fragile as glass. Whatever was coming would change the odds, either in her favor or in the predator's. He braced himself, eyes fixed on the shadows between the trees. As the thundering grew closer, they came like a storm breaking through the fog. 5 Mustangs, manes streaming, hooves striking the earth in a rolling drumbeat. At their head was a young stallion, his coat a burnished copper that caught what little sunlight filtered through the mist. His neck arched high, ears pinned, eyes fixed on the predator wrapped around the mare. Every line of his body was defiance. Luke held his ground as the herd fanned out. 2 Mares veered left, cutting a wide arc to flank the trapped one. Another, dark as wet soil, swung right, her gait taut with controlled fury. The stallion didn't slow. He thundered straight toward the python, stopping only when the ground between them shook. The snake lifted its head, mouth opening in a silent gape, tongue tasting the air heavy with dust and sweat. The stallion scream tore through the clearing, a sound so sharp and primal it seemed to slice the mist apart. He lunged forward, striking the earth inches from the snake's skull, dirt spraying. The python recoiled, loosening its grip by the smallest fraction. Luke saw the gap and moved. He dropped low, circling to the predator's tail. The mare's breathing was shallow now, foam flecking her lips. Her flanks heaved, legs trembling under the strain. He could almost feel the pressure of those coils in his own ribs. The python twisted, sensing him. Its body was warm and slick under his hands, the muscles shifting like something alive within something else. Luke dug his boots into the churned ground and yanked, but it was like trying to pull free a tree root. The snake whipped toward him, striking short, its path diverted at the last instant by the stallion's rearing lunge. Hooves came down hard, the impact shuddering up Luke's legs through the earth. Another mare joined the stallion, kicking with precision, her blows landing close enough to sting the predator without striking Luke. Their coordination was uncanny, a rhythm born from survival. Dust swirled around them, clinging to sweat-slick coats and the sharp tang of adrenaline. Luke looped the lasso over the snake's tail and wrapped it twice around his forearm. The rope bit into his skin as he leaned back with all his weight. The python's body writhed, tightening once more around the mare before slipping, coil by coil. The freed mare staggered sideways, almost falling. One of the flanking Mares pressed her shoulder against her, steadying her with a slow, deliberate nudge. The stallion kept between them and the predator, driving it back with another charge. The python retreated in a slow, liquid wave, its body sliding into the underbrush where the light fell to shadow. Its head lingered for a moment, tongue flicking, as if committing them all to memory. Then it was gone, vanishing into the folds of the forest floor. For a moment, nothing moved but the steam rising from the horse's flanks. The air felt thick, every breath heavy in Luke's chest. He loosened the rope, letting it fall into the dirt. His arms shook, not from fear, though it still threaded cold in his blood, but from the sheer force of holding on. The herd closed in around the pregnant mare. They didn't touch her at once. Instead, they shifted in slow, deliberate steps, the circle drawing tighter until she was at its heart. Luke could see the fine tremor in her muscles, the way her head hung low yet her ears stayed forward, alert to the movements of her protectors. One of the younger Mares turned her gaze toward him. It wasn't the wild, unseeing look of a feral horse meeting a man. It was measured, appraising, as though she were weighing his place in what had just happened. Luke didn't move. He let them decide when the moment was over. The stallion finally snorted, shaking his mane, and the tension in the air eased by degrees. The herd began to shift, guiding the injured mare toward the edge of the clearing. She stumbled once, but the bodies beside her closed ranks immediately, holding her steady. Luke watched them go, the sound of their hoofbeats fading into the trees. He knew he could turn back now, return to the broken fence to quiet the safe, but his boots stayed rooted to the trampled earth. Something in the way they had moved, fought, and reclaimed one of their own had pulled him into their story, and he couldn't yet bring himself to step out. From somewhere beyond the cottonwoods came the low murmur of the creek, the same sound that had carried him here. He drew a slow breath, eyes tracking the space where the herd had vanished, and found himself already wondering where they would go next and whether he would follow. Luke trailed them at a careful distance, his steps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves. The pregnant mare's gait was uneven, her back legs stiff with fatigue. Flank wounds from the python's scales oozed in thin, dark lines, staining the dust along her side. Still, She kept moving, guided by the steady presence of Stallion and the Mares flanking her. Their bodies formed a loose wall, shifting with each step to shield her from any direction a threat might come. He recognized the glade they were heading toward, a low hollow with a stream curling through it like a silver thread. Its banks were soft with moss and overhung with willows, offering shelter from the wind. The herd slowed as they entered, the tension in their shoulders easing but not vanishing. The pregnant mare stopped at the water's edge, lowering her head to drink in slow, careful swallows. Luke stayed just beyond the glade's outer ring, hands loose at his sides. He knew better than to crowd them. Still, when she faltered and nearly lost her footing, his body moved before his mind caught up. He stepped forward, voice low, a murmur meant only for her. She didn't spook, though her ears flicked back to track him. Kneeling, he pulled a canteen from his belt, pouring a shallow measure into his cup palm. She eyed it, nostrils flaring, then leaned down to take a sip. Her muzzle was warm and damp against his skin. Up close, the weight of her condition was clear. The foal inside shifted faintly, a subtle ripple beneath taut skin. Luke's chest tightened. A premature birth, brought on by the stress of the attack, could take them both. He remembered long nights in a hospital chair, listening to a machine count each fragile heartbeat of a life not yet born, praying it would hold on. He swallowed the memory down before it could pull him under. He tore a strip from the inside of his shirt and dipped it into the stream, pressing it gently against the scrapes along her flank. She flinched, muscles tensing, but didn't move away. The stallion watched, head lowered, his eyes never leaving Luke's hands. It wasn't trust, more a wary tolerance, but it was enough. The other Mares grazed nearby, though they kept their ears turned toward the glade's entrance. They knew predators rarely gave up after one failed strike. The python was somewhere in these woods, and other dangers moved under the same trees. The air itself seemed to listen, heavy and expectant. Luke finished, cleaning the wounds, letting the damp cloth fall into the grass. The mare stood steadier now, her breathing slower. He sat back on his heels, giving her space, though his eyes kept scanning the tree line. The late afternoon light had shifted, taking on a warmer hue that caught the dust in the air like gold. Beneath it, the glade felt momentarily safe, but Luke knew how quickly that could change. A low rumble rolled in from the west. Thunder. The sound was distant, but the herd reacted instantly, ears forward, heads lifting, bodies subtly angling toward higher ground. Storms out here could turn the creek into a rushing wall in minutes. For the mare, weakened and heavy, that kind of crossing could be fatal. Luke's hand tightened reflexively around the rope at his belt. He could walk away now, leave them to their instincts. It was the way of the wild. Strong survive, weak fall. But the memory of the herd's return to the clearing wouldn't leave him. They had risked themselves to fight for her. That kind of loyalty wasn't common, not even among people. The stallion moved toward the creek, testing the current with a hoof. Then he looked back, not at the other horses, but at Luke. The moment hung between them, strange and wordless. Luke felt it like a pull in his chest, the same pull that had brought him into the clearing earlier. Rain-dark clouds thickened over the ridge. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wet earth and the faint metallic tang that always preceded lightning. The herd began to move, the injured mare slow but determined in their center. Luke stepped in behind them, not to lead, not to command, just to be there. The ground ahead proved harder than they could manage alone. The rain came first as a whisper, darkening the dust at their feet, then thickened into a steady curtain that blurred the hills ahead. The herd pressed forward, hooves finding purchase in the slick ground with deliberate care. Luke matched their pace, every step attuned to the mare's faltering rhythm. Her breaths were heavy now, steam rising from her nostrils, but she didn't stop. Each shift of her weight seemed a declaration that she would not give in. They climbed toward a low ridge, the land tilting upward in slow, uneven pitches. The stallion stayed close to her flank, occasionally brushing her with his shoulder as if to remind her she wasn't alone. The other Mares worked the perimeter, their ears in constant motion, eyes scanning the rain-hushed world for movement. Even the yearlings seemed to understand the gravity of the moment, their usual skittish energy replaced with quiet, measured pace. At the crest, the view opened into a wide basin mottled with sage and short grass. Through the rain's veil, Luke saw movement. More Mustangs, scattered across the basin like shadows come to life. Heads lifted as the ridgetop herd descended, and the shapes below began to converge. They met in a slow, deliberate mingling, Mare stepping forward to greet the injured one with soft touches of their muzzles. The larger stallions kept a respectful distance, their dark eyes fixed on the newcomer. The pregnant mare stood still in their center, sides heaving, rein flattening her mane against her neck. For a moment, it seemed she might fall to the ground, but the circle around her tightened, bodies angling in to shield her from the wind. The sound of it, those quiet nickers and low breaths, was almost human in its tenderness. Luke felt it settle into him like heat after a long freeze. He took a step back, aware his part in this was finished. He'd done what he could. She was theirs now, in the only way that mattered. Still, something in him resisted turning away. He had known loss in its rawest form, the kind that stripped a life to silence. Watching them reclaim her, seeing her find her place again in that living wall of protection, stirred something he thought was gone. Then, through the silver haze of rain, she looked at him. Not long, just enough for her gaze to hold his in a quiet tether. There was no fear in it now, no frantic edge, only a steady regard, as if she recognized him not as a savior, but as another creature who understood the cost of surviving. The herd began to drift deeper into the basin, their bodies melting into the rain and grass. Luke stayed until their outlines blurred, until the sound of their hooves was nothing more than a faint thud against the earth. Only then did he turn back toward the ridge. The storm deepened behind him, wind rising, rattling the sage. His jacket clung heavy to his shoulders, water dripping from his hair into his collar, but his chest felt lighter than it had in years. He'd stepped into a fight that wasn't his and found, in the chaos, a reminder that not all battles end in loss. At the ridge's edge, he paused to look back. Through the shifting rain, the basin was empty. The herd vanished as if the land had simply swallowed them whole. He knew they were still out there, moving, watching, surviving together. Somewhere among them, the mare carried the weight of a life not yet born, and perhaps the memory of a man who had stood his ground beside her herd. Luke started down the slope toward the cottonwoods, the rain softening to a fine mist. The earth smelled rich and alive beneath his boots. Ahead lay the creek, the broken fence, the quiet routine waiting to resume. But as he walked, the echo of hooves lingered in his ears, a rhythm that felt less like departure and more like an invitation.